Hey Diamonds, I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback on a couple of things I've noticed on work for this week, primarily in math and in reading. So, first of all, I want to talk about the math, geometry, quadrilaterals. A lot of us are struggling to notice that types of quadrilaterals like rhombus, rectangle, and parallelogram, they have a few things that are their attributes, things that a shape has to have in order to be called that type of quadrilateral. And one of the biggest barriers, that means blocks, that we have in our mind is that we think we know what a shape is all about. Because we've been drawing shapes for years and years and years. You've probably been drawing shapes since kindergarten and first grade, or maybe even earlier. And we think we know what's super important about those shapes. But when we really start learning our geometry and the attributes, the must-haves of the shape, sometimes those aren't the things we're used to thinking about. And so I want to talk for just a minute about these types of quadrilaterals and what makes them each special. Okay? So for a rhombus, it has to have four sides because it's a quadrilateral. And all the sides have to be equal. They all have to be the same length sides. And that means any shape that has four sides and they're all the same length can be called a rhombus. It does not have to be slanted or squished or turned sideways so the point is pointing up and pointing down. A rhombus does not have to look like a diamond. It can look different. But as long as it has four sides and they're all the same length, it doesn't matter which way it's turned or if they're slanty or if it looks like a diamond. Those are the two attributes that can make a shape be classified as a rhombus. Now, let's talk about rectangle, because this is one of those ones that you've been drawing for a long time. And over and over and over again, third graders want to tell me that a rectangle has to have two short sides and two long sides. And that is the idea that we always kind of get in our minds when somebody says the word rectangle. And if I asked any third grader to draw me a rectangle, it probably would have two short sides and two long sides. However, the length of the sides is not what qualifies a shape as a rectangle. What? This is a time where we kind of have to do some unlearning, unfortunately, because a lot of times as we grow up and we start in school and we start learning our shapes, we're told exactly the way you imagine a rectangle. It has to have two short sides and it has to have two long sides, and that's just not true. So as you can see on our note sheet that I posted, and those of you who were in the Google Meet you made with me, if a shape has four sides, because it is a quadrilateral, if it has four sides and four right angles, that means every place where two sides come together, a perfect square or a perfect 90-degree angle is created. If there's four of those, it's a rectangle. And it doesn't matter if there's two short sides or two long sides. There could be four long sides. There could be four short sides. There could be two long and two short. But that's not what makes the shape a rectangle. What makes the shape a rectangle are the number of sides and having four right angles. And then we have our parallelogram. And this one's challenging because parallel can be a new idea for most third graders. It can be difficult to say, and parallelogram can be really difficult to say. And sometimes just the word parallel, or words parallel and parallelogram, can kind of get in the way of our understanding about what makes that shape special. So a parallelogram is another type of quadrilateral, which means it has to have four sides. And the other attribute, the other thing it has to have, is parallel sides that are opposite. The opposite sides have to be parallel. So if you look at the line on the top, the opposite of top is bottom. So the opposite side would have to be parallel. It would have to run and never get closer to each other, never point away or point toward each other. They would stay the same distance away, even if they continued on forever and ever and ever and ever. That would make them parallel. And then you got to check the other sides. For example, if you look at the one on the left, the opposite of left is right. If the sides on the two sides that are on the left and the right are parallel, they run on forever and ever and ever and never cross or intersect, then they are opposite parallel sides. It's not about parallel lines. We learn about parallel by looking at lines, but when we talk about a shape, when we talk about a parallelogram, we have to be careful of the vocabulary we use. We are looking at the sides and asking ourselves, are the opposite sides parallel? That's the attribute that makes a parallelogram. It doesn't matter if it's kind of slanted. That's not important. So things like color and slant or the way they're turned, those are not attributes for a shape. The things that are attributes for a shape are all about the sides and or the angles. Sides and angles. That's what I want you to think about when you're deciding if a shape is a special kind of quadrilateral. And the thing we're really struggling with is the idea that one shape can be more than one type of quadrilateral. And if you are in the Google Meet, we did a little exercise where we talked about who in the group is a third grader. Everybody raised their hand. Who is a Dale's Diamond? Everybody raised their hand. Who is a Forest Hills Falcon? Everybody raised their hand. Who is an Alabamian? Everybody raised their hand because we all live in Alabama. So we talked about how one student could be listed as a third grader. They could be listed as a Dale's Diamond because they're in third grade and in Mrs. Dale's class. They could be listed as a Forest Hills Falcon because they go to Forest Hills and that's our mascot. They could be listed as an Alabamian because they live in the state of Alabama. So we could have one person and we could say that they're 4 different types of people: a third grader, a diamond, a falcon, and an Alabamian. And it works the same way with shapes, with quadrilaterals. One shape could be more than one type of quadrilateral. And the perfect example of that is a square. And that's why it's in the middle of this note page, because a square is a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides. A square is a rhombus because it has 4 sides and all of the sides are equal to each other. They're all the same length. A square is a rectangle. What? A square is a rectangle.